break it.
What's the day, Mama?
Today, 4th of July.
4th of July. We got the American flag behind you and Papa.
Baby Sam's birthday, 13th.
Tell me about America, Mama. Tell me about America.
I can't get that far today. I don't remember that.
Now, I'm asking you, though.
Well, I was
Were you born in America?
yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born up in Madisonville.
Well, that's not America, is it?
Uh,
Is Madisonville in America? Is that right?
Yeah. Right here, man.
Texas is part of the United States?
Yeah.
Who's the president?
President
Clinton.
Yeah. You know him? You know, I know all those presidents back there. Bush, Reagan, Reagan got their own Congress. Got a lot of presidents in the church. I went back and shook hands.
J. Grant. You shook his hand.
George Albert Smith, give Rudy and your mother a book.
What kind of book? Hinckley. Were you born in America?
Yes.
You sure?
Yeah, constant. No question about it.
Who was the president of the United States when you were born?
Let's see.
Well, it wasn't George Washington, was it?
No.
Abe Lincoln.
I bet so. Oh, we remember he got shot. I remember blood up there.
You don't remember when Lincoln was shot?
President Lincoln was shot. That's
Lincoln? He died before you were born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we went to see where he was shot.
He was shot in a theater, right?
Yeah. In Washington, D.C.
Hmm?
Who was this? Let's see. I don't know.
Who was the first president you remember?
I guess Roosevelt. I really remember.
Did you vote for him? Who's the first?
He was a Democrat.
Who's the first president you voted for?
I guess it was. I guess Roosevelt was. He died about that time. That when we had to save sugar?
You had to ration your sugar?
Yeah. That was World War II. Well, I had 3 kids, and I had plenty of sugar. A lot of people.
How much?
I didn't use 5 pounds.
5 pounds of sugar a month.
Yeah, I don't use that much now. Maybe you got 2. You had them give them chicken.
What president was president when I was born? that would have been probably Kennedy. Is that right? About 61?
Yes, that's about
And then I can remember Eisenhower being president after that.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe.
Hoover was in that too.
Hoover wasn't that one.
Do you remember when Kennedy was shot?
Yes,
That's when
very much.
we was down in the garage apartment. I was upstairs and he was cooling the building. And I got out, I heard it on the radio and got down and went up and told him that President Kennedy had got shot. That's how old that garage apartment was. And I mean, I put that, what do you call it, behind the wall, keeping the freezing pipe.
Insulation?
Insulation behind that pipe, and thank goodness it's never froze yet. I packed that good. Because that's facing the north. When we did it on hanging, that was north, what always froze on us. You know, we had that house 50 years. We sold it. We paid about $2,000 for it. Then we sold it
You sold it for what?
for $2,000.
You sold it for 2,000.
I thought maybe we might have an enemy, but Lawrence, he loved. It's $450 a month now. He says it's a woman and a man and a father, one father.
What did you, when you were a kid in Madisonville, what would you do on July 4th?
Well,
Would you have a picnic?
yeah, I think they had a picnic. Gosh, we're not a kid. We used to make ice cream.
Make homemade ice cream?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember what you did when you was a kid on July 4th, Papa?
Yeah, yeah.
What did they do?
The church had a party.
Ah,
Oh, that's right. We had a party raising funds for it.
We had an ice cream party. And I didn't know. Mom wasn't a member at that time.
well, it depends. Did they have a parade or anything?
Oh,
Or did you guys have a little,
We used to have Pioneer Day on 24th.
ah.
That's when we used to celebrate and make money on the
our big
24th.
day was the 24th.
So you get all dressed up?
I did. I got a picture. I
Yeah,
showed you I had on Pioneer.
Overalls on.
Wait a minute, what was you wearing, Mama?
I had a polka dot maroon wool dress down here. You ought to see that picture now. You remember Charles Eunice? You remember the Eunice?
I don't know.
Me and him was in the parade.
She wasn't a member of the church.
Yeah, I was there. We had that out the Shell. Shell had a park where she could rent. Sometimes we see that moved out there. I should show you that someday. You have to see it. Dorothy ought to know what she said.
So were you the queen of the July 4th?
No, I was me and him. I had a long dress.
And is that when you fell in love with her, Papa, on July 4th?
No.
When she was all dressed up?
We done married.
You were done married?
Yeah, that's when we did the church. Yeah.
Now you was married when you was 10 years old, right?
Oh, no, that's a long time ago.
Before that? Say hi to the people in TV land, Mom.
I'm Dustin and Candace. We enjoyed
What is your name?
Viola Stallers. We are glad to come up to visit you and see Candace West. We have enjoyed our trip very much. We'll try to meet again when you have it.
All right, Viola, let us know where you going.
I was born in Madison County, November the 19th, 1910.
No, tell the truth.
That is true. And my next birthday will be 79.
And
How many years Been married 60 years, January the 26th. I'll give you the picture of it. I think I put it on the dates. You'll have to remember that. And I remember when you was born, too.
When I was born,
Yeah.
what did you do?
What I do, I taken care of you. You was about 9 years old while your mom was working.
Do you remember when you were 9 years old?
No, I don't.
Do you remember when you were?
Do you remember, let's see, do you remember when you were baptized?
Yeah, in the Sandy Center River.
How old were you?
How old I was just two, 2 years before Dorothy, a year and a half before she was born. So that would make 1930.
So you're 20 years old.
Yeah, that's right.
Was Papa there?
Yeah. But Elder Goop baptized me, and he lived down here in someplace in Salt Lake. I forgot the name. I have your picture. We visited him like a year ago.
You did.
That's, yeah.
Where did you and Papa get married?
And a Baptist preacher in the home, and his wife was a witness, and that's all.
And then you went and stayed at the Hilton that night?
Oh, the Hilton. We stayed in the room. We stayed in the
In the honeymoon suite, and they had a heart-shaped tub?
honeymoon suite with my mother, my stepfather, and my sister, and her husband was on the floor on the bed. 3 couples in there. That was great. Your papa had $1.50.
Oh, you
Tell us your name.
you control it for
No, tell us your name.
my name is Moroni.
Moroni,
Moroni Stone.
Edward Moroni Stone.
Yes, Edward Moroni Stone.
Where were you born?
Maybe in Josie, Texas.
Josie, Texas.
Yes,
What year?
in 1911, February 14th.
So on your next birthday, how old are you going to be?
Next time will be 78.
Okay. What, who are you here to see?
Well, you know, I'm retired, and I like to go places. And one of the first place that I thought I would like to come was here to visit John and Kay and Jocelyn and Candace, because they are 4 of my very special people. And one reason I came at this time, my son has been given 4 or 5 states in the area that he has to visit 3 times a year, and he was coming up, so I thought I would come back and spend a week or so.
Tell us about when you were a little boy.
Well, as far as I can remember back, of course, we lived on a farm. My father was a farmer. We raised cotton, corn, and feed for the stock. And when I was real young, we had our assignments to do. I guess I milked my first cow at probably 8 years old, or maybe 9 years old. But I was a little story, John. I hope you won't. my hands would get so tired that you got cramps in them. And so I would go, we always had out on the back porch a drinking water in a big jar, big container. So I would go by there and take about 4 or 5 dippers of water and put it in the milk, so it would look like that I had lots of milk. And so my mother, she said the cow, something was wrong with the cows. The milk was no good. It wasn't too thin. There was no cream would collect on the top, because in the country, they pour the milk up at night. Next morning, they skim the cream off, and they churn for butter, and we drank the milk. But this wasn't no butter coming up on the milk, so they set a trap for me and found that I was the one that was putting water into the milk to make my bucket full. So, but on the farm, we had a good life. We had a good time. We had,
How many brothers and sisters?
well, in the beginning we had 9, but one of them, I don't know her name. She died at about 1 day after birth. I have her name in my genealogy book, but the next one that passed was a boy, and he lived about 2 or 3 years old. And I forgot his name. I'd have to look back in my genealogy book. But in between them, I had a sister was born. Her was named Carrie, and she lived to be about 86 years old. And our family all died early, as most people did back in those days, because they didn't have the medication and things. But my sister lived for a long while, and I am now 87. I'm sorry, 77, and will be 78 next year when the 14th of February turns. So I've had a good life. I've enjoyed my life. Where do you want me to go?
Are you the youngest?
I was next to the youngest.
Did you go to school?
Yes, we went to school. I probably finished the 7th grade, maybe. Then we went up to Madisonville, where you had to go after you finished the 8th grade. And I remember going up there because my parents had moved there. And my father put in a grocery store, in which we lived a couple of 3 years, but he was unhappy and wanted to go back to the farm. So the old saying is that when we was on the farm, we went to school when it was too wet to plow. When we had to work in the field, we had to work in the field. But my education, I was very happy with it in my life. You want me to continue a little about on my education? I'd like for this to go in. The biggest break I ever had, 1 year, we looked for a bumper crop of cotton. When we started in the spring, the cotton was 30 cents a pound. When we finished, the cotton had gone down to 5. So we went in a hole. We didn't make anything. So then I was about 15 years old. So I told my dad, but I may back up a minute. In the meantime of all of this living, my folks decided to move to Salt Lake City. And we stayed here maybe a year and a half. But they wanted to go back to the farm, so we went back to the farm. But anyway, now I pick up where, when I left the farm, I had one older brother was married. He and I come from Josie or Madisonville, near Madisonville, and come to Houston. Well, he spent the night, and of course he was homesick for his wife, and the next day he returned back to the farm. So I continued on. I had a cousin that was working in a laundry, and she got me a job at Herman Hospital, and so in the linen department, where they send the linen out to have it laundered and to use over in the hospital. So I got acquainted with the chief engineer, and he liked me for what, I don't know, but he spoke always and very kind, and they would have drink, I may say soda pop. They drank other things, but none of us, he would ever offer anything but soda water. And he was a good man. His name was Ed Bannon. Give me the biggest break of my life. One day he said to me, he said, would you like to come to work in our department? Because at that time, the Herman Hospital was only connected with the city by telephone. We had our Skinner Uniflow engines that made the power. We had big boilers. We had four, about 350-ton boilers and heaters, and we had everything there to learn about engineering. So when Ed Bannon asked me if I would come, if I would like to come into his department, and he said, there's one catch on this, and that is you have to go to school. He said the museum will pay for it and give me time. But I didn't need the time because it was night and I worked daytime or evening classes. So I started in his department and started to school. And he would sit down at his desk during the day, and he would go over the equations, and it's very hard for me because I had to learn square root, cube root, and all things that went with figuring out problems of engineers. So after I went to school, for a certain length of time you had to go and take the exam to get your city license, because the city of Houston is very hard on licensing. But in the meantime, and all the other that we learned during this was we learned electrical, we learned refrigeration. Now this, you'll have to think, is before air conditioning come on. No air conditioning then. But there was refrigeration, and we made all our ice. That's what that's for. And we made ice in 200-pound blocks, and every day we had to take them out of the pit, wash them off, and put them for use up in the museum. So anyway, I got married during that time, and Vala, she stayed at home. And
Vala who?
Vala Stone, my wife.
What was her name before that?
Her name was Hall, and I'll tell you a little about her in just a minute. But the real thing, she put up with me going to school. I went to school 3 nights a week, and usually about 2.5 hours each night. And the next morning, our chief engineer, Ed Bannon, said, what did you learn? And you went over it with him. And he showed you where you was lacking in what area. So he knowing that I didn't have a good education. But one of the things I'd like to say is this. On my engineering license that I'd taken last, I had taken two of the others first. And my grade was very low on that. It was about 2 points below passing. And one of the men that sit on the board that give us the examinations, he told me, he said, Stone, he said, I would fail you if I didn't know that you know better. But excuse this language, but this is what he said. He said, you have the damnedest way of expressing yourself. But he said, I know you know what you want, so I'm going to pass you. I mean, what you know what you need to know. But he made that remark to me, and I guess I did, because my English was bad. I never studied English much. My studying was when I come to Houston and went to this school. I learned most. Then later on, a few years later, when air conditioning come, the city made a rule of air conditioning license. So there I had to go back studying again, but I had married and my children was born then. So I had to go back and study for air conditioning. Then, just a year or two after air conditioning, they come in with another license, made the fourth license you had to have to operate in the city of Houston, and that was maintenance license. You had to know to work on electric motors and telephone systems, because we had a telephone system within the unit, and you had to know how to work that, and they are very complicated when you are not a telephone man. But we lost the telephone man, he quit, and another man was over us too, was named.
I don't want to hear about the telephone man.
You want to hear about him?
I don't want to hear about him. I don't
Oh,
know.
well, let me mention this name. His name was Ed Bannon.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Metcalf.
All right.
Metcalf was his name, and he taught me that.
I want to hear about this lady you married.
All right, then I feel like after that I went to many different buildings to work, and I worked 58 years. I was never out of a job. I don't know that I ever put in an application, but I had a daughter that always helped me to ask for the salary I wanted. And that was John Thomas's mother, and she was kind of my counselor. And she said I always asked for too little money. Now then, my wife, Viola, she just went along.
Is that an American name, Viola? Is that American?
Yes. Viola, Lena Viola is American, but however, Viola was part Indian. Her father was Indian, and her mother was English. And her father got killed when she was young. But one thing, and they were several children ahead. She was the baby of the bunch. But what made all of us teed off, her father furnished her a horse to go to school, to ride. And everybody else walked, even to her brothers and sisters. And we had about 3.5 miles to walk. Rain or sleet, or that's all we had. We didn't have any snow up in that country. So anyway, it made us all jealous. But anyway, I wound up. But John, I'll tell you, this may come as a shock to you, but I knew, as the Lord knew, that she was going to be my wife. I knew that from the time we played, that we was kids. And so
when did you know her? You grew up together?
all my life.
All your life?
I never did know that I didn't know her, because her mother and my mother was real good friends. We lived near each other. So we dated a little. I dated her sister some,
Which
and,
sister?
Eleanor. And, but he wound up with Viola, and we went together a little, but when I come to Houston, then I would go back, because my brother had married her half-sister, and she would come to visit her, and we would go out, not too seriously, just real good friends, but we soon figured out, or when, I don't know what she figured out, but when I asked her if she would marry me, she said yes. And thing, she didn't hesitate too much. Now, she may tell you she resisted, but she didn't. But the thing would have it, John, is this. Willard had come down, which is Jim's father, and we had Joe Mixon that married my wife's sister, the one that I had gone with some, and we we all dated together, but for the climax of our wedding and all, when Willard and I went to my mother and father for that we would like to get married, that we would like to ask these girls' mothers, their family, which my Viola's father had been killed some time back, and her mother had married again to a good man named Lee Hampton. But anyway, when we asked our parents about getting married, and by the way, I was real old, I was 17 years old, and she was 18 years old. So my mother said, well, she had picked out Viola for me and Madeline Smith, which Willard had met here in Houston, to be our wives. And so, of course, Viola's mother was happy, and I heard her tell Viola when we talked to her about getting married, she said, well, I'll be happy for you to marry Moroni, because I know that he will always have you living, have you eats and things that you need. And how she knew that, I didn't know, because she didn't know me that well. Didn't know that I had a lazy streak.
Did y'all go to Hawaii for your honeymoon?
No, we didn't. You know, this is quite unique for a honeymoon. We had a wonderful honeymoon. She lived at Madisonville, her folks did, and of course I was in Houston. That day that we went up to Madisonville, my mother went with me, and we had, Willard and I had a car that we owned together. So I taken it, and on the way up there, we had about 1 or 2 flats. Anyway, it taken all the money that I had. So, I had a little bit, but not enough to get back to Houston. So we went and arrived in Madisonville, and out at Josie lived my brother Sherman, and his wife Beulah. They had some children, but that was about all of my folks were left up at Josie at that time, other than nephews and cousins, not brothers. And so we got married. We was married by a Baptist minister. John, if I get too long, you better tell me. My father was a Baptist, and a good one, because he was so good, you could ask him where a passage in the scripture was. He could tell you. He didn't have to look it up. He could tell you right where it was at. And this is what got him in trouble with the Baptist church. Because many things in there, he would go to his minister, and his minister would say, well, that's done away with. And we don't have to bother about that, but my dad didn't take that. So his name was Braceful. And the reason I want to lean up,
Whose name was Graceful?
the minister, the Baptist minister, because he enters the pictures again, or the Braceville does. So anyway, my mother was very sickly, and the doctors had come and just said it was no use to call him back because she couldn't live anyway. So they prayed, and the next day there were two Mormon missionaries come and knocked on the door. Now they didn't live right in Josie. They lived down on the creek really at that time. So these two missionaries come, and they were greeted and invited in, and my dad went there quizzing them about the church and about the scriptures. And so these two missionaries had the answers. So my dad accepted the church that night, was baptized the next day. Now my mother, her name was Rosie Francis. I think we've said that once, but anyway.
Well, what was her name?
Rosie Francis Strand was her real name before she married the Monday Stone, my father. And the Strand come from Germany. My grandfather, this is just switching around a little, but I'd like to mention that he and his brother ran away from Germany during the Persian War. And they come to New York, and they put in a Strand Theater. Now, I'll mention that again in a little. But my grandfather decided he wanted to come further south. So he met my mother, which was a Strand, and coincidence would have it, her parents were German too. But anyway, to continue on with...
So your dad got baptized?
Yes, he got baptized the next day. And my mother about a year later, because she was in bad shape. And so, of course, they has been in the church all their lives, and every son they had held the Melchizedek priesthood, was elders. And so as time rolled along, we go back to our wonderful wedding and wonderful honeymoon. Well, we went up, and my wife, Viola, she didn't want Brother Foster, who was the branch president, to marry us, because just the way he talked. She had heard him marry some other couples, and the way he talked, she didn't want him to marry us. So we went, and the minister there in Madisonville was named Braceville, which was the son of the man that was my father's minister back before he joined the church. And so he performed the wedding. His wife stood for the best person, for witness really is all it amounted to. And Paul and I was married. No one was there but the minister and his wife and Viola and I. And so we was married, and so we thought we would go out to Josie. Yeah, I still had the car. My mother was out at Josie, so we got in the car and we went out, and so we had a good time. They really welcomed us, and of course I had to come back Sunday to go to work Monday. And our honeymoon was a little short. But after we went out to Josie to visit my brother and his family, and my mother was out there, well, we went, I went over to my Uncle Sam, who was my mother's father, and my mother's brother, I'm sorry. And he was the one that ran the grocery store, that place, and the post office. So I borrowed $5 from Uncle Sam to get us back to Houston, because I was broke. I didn't have any money. And so we proceeded then up to Fowler's mother's home, So when we got there, the company had come in. So that night of our honeymoon, we spent that night in the same room with her mother and father, with her brother and sister, and she and I was in one room. So we made it through, and it finally come daylight. So they prepared a big dinner for us that day, but anyway, I had to go to Uncle Sam and borrow $5, and we got prepared, and that was back to Houston was really our honeymoon. So it come to the time, another payday or so, I had to tell her that I had to send Dr. Sam $5. And she said, well, why are you sending Dr. Sam $5? And I told her I didn't have any money when we married to get us back to Houston. But that's when gasoline then was 12, 15 cents a gallon. So anyway, we sent him the $5. And she griped at me a little. She said, well, why didn't you tell me? I had $35. And the reason she had $35, every time one of her mother's children married, she gave them a cow. So she had sold her cow for $35. So this is the way we started.
Where
So,
did you live in Houston?
We first moved in with Joe and Eleanor. Her older sister was next to her. They had married 2 weeks prior to our marriage. And I'd like to say then we married and Willard, my other brother, married 2 weeks after we married. So there was 3 of us just freshly married. But we moved in with them. And I'll never forget when we got back, we made it all right back. Joe Mixon was my brother-in-law. He had fixed the bed, so when we got in the bed, all the slats would fall out. So, so naturally, young, you'd get dressed, you'd run and jump in the bed or do crazy things, and that's what I did. I run and jumped in the bed, and all the slats fell out of the bed on the floor. And there they was laughing all the time at what was going on. So anyway, Monday morning come, John, and that was the end of our honeymoon.
All right. Well, we're going to end the tape right here for a while.
Cut. Take one.
I'll say. That's something.
Think they're sisters?
Yes, sir, they're sister. You mean this with Josh?
Uh-huh.
You don't mean.
Yeah.
Well, now I take that to be her.
Okay, do you remember your baptism?
Yes.
Tell us about your baptism.
Well, we was very excited, like all young people are when they turn 8 years old. When that day come, they was, I don't remember their name, but they were several baptized, and we were baptized in what they call a tank that belonged to Aunt Sally. Now, nowadays they call it a lake, but it wasn't. It was just a man-made, in a low area of her pasture, a tank was made, and that's where we was baptized. Now, while you ask that, I'd like to say this too. And when Vala was converted to the church, she was baptized in a river. So that was really the starting of ours getting really involved. And I would, as I had mentioned maybe before in this, John, I would have to give your grandmother more of the credit than I really, because as we said before, we may back up a little. I'd have to about my success that I have had in my life has been great far as we are concerned because of our children our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. But Viola, she supported me in about every venture I wanted to make. Some of them was very bad, but most of them was very good. And we played it by ear. So after baptism, going back
Who
now,
baptized you?
Brother Foster, the branch president. I have my certificate at home in my genealogy book of all of my ordinations up to the last ones when I was ordained to be patriarch. Well,
And you were confirmed?
I don't know. I really don't remember that.
Okay.
But I think it was by a missionary. I am not sure of that.
Who was at your baptism?
The whole community. When we had any event like that, about everyone that went to church was at the baptism.
Mama wasn't a member then, was she?
Huh?
Was Mama a member at the church
Oh,
then?
yes.
She was?
Oh, yes. Oh, no, I'm
She wasn't
sorry.
baptized then, was she?
I'm thinking about my mama. Oh, no.
Would she go
See?
watch?
No. They still lived up at Madisonville in Josie. They moved once or twice to Madisonville and back to Josie and up to Madisonville. So I don't know where they live, but see, she was only, she's about 4 months older than I am. So none of them wasn't a member, but I would like to say this, that they were Pentecostal, I believe. I'm not sure of that. Or, yeah, it was Pentecostal, I'm sure. But back then, John, is about once a year or every 2 years, President Binion brought all the elders in that area of Houston, and in the area, they come on the train, and they come, maybe it was 15 missionaries. But Viola's mother always taken them in, because they stayed in people's home, and she always taken the missionaries in and give them lodging and eats and everything, and they'd taken part in the church a lot. But when we would have, back then, we didn't know what it meant, MIA, but we had mutual. And Viola and her sisters, they would take part in these programs there. And they was very close because my mother and Viola's mother was the best of friends. They were just like sisters. They lived just a short distance apart. And they were always together. They went places. Usually, I'll tell you just a little thing. Viola's mother, her name was Vera, and my mother was going to see someone down at, toward Beat Eyes. I forget who they was going to see, but they was in a buggy. And Willard and I were standing up in the back of the seat. And so Mama was driving, and she turned to a lane to go up to this house, and she's going pretty fast, and Willard fell out, and the wheel run over him. So all are crying and going on. They thought they'd hurt him, but they hadn't hurt him. He was sandy, and but it didn't hurt him a bit. So we went on our journey and back. But things of this sort happened back then. I've done told you all about the school, and it was a great experience for us. And I may tell you this: we played a lot together, and with the Lindsay boys and us and the Fosters, and we'd go to different houses as kids, like Joshy and, maybe a little bit older, but we had a good time. We had, as I said, we had our programs. We presented some plays, productions, and they were, you wouldn't call them productions, I don't know what you'd call them. But anyway, and we had a full organization as far as the MIA and priesthood group, and not all of the auxiliaries, but I don't think they had a primary. I think the little ones was taught of it, and
Tell me about the first time you went to the temple.
well, we was married, as I explained, I'm sure, in this conversation before. After I was put in to the branch presidency, then we decided we had better make arrangements to go to the temple. So the nearest temple there then was Salt Lake Temple. So we made provision, and we had a car, and Joe and Etal was married at that time, and they decided they would go with us. And we all made the trip. It was only, I'm really not sure of the children back then, but I know Dorothy was born, and probably Rudolph was a baby. With Joe and Etal didn't have any children. And so with our family and them, we proceeded to come to the Salt Lake Temple. And so the only reason that we could afford to come, as provision had been made that we stayed at that time, Francis Stevens had been married to Verge James, and they had moved out here. And by the way, back just a minute, we was all so close that Verge and Francis, they'd taken Dorothy, and Verge was finishing his education at Huntsville, at the University of, I don't know, Huntsville? It was a graduating university. But anyway, Verge went up there, so I'll never forget this. They wanted to take Dorothy with them. She was just she was about the size of Joshy, maybe a little bit larger, but not much. She could talk on the telephone, and so Valor consented to let them take Dorothy. And so they'd taken Dorothy to Huntsville, and your mama, she cried and had to call and talk to Dorothy. But anyway, Francis kept Dorothy that week, and they brought her back on the weekend. But same as other people I may mention here, the Stevens family was very close. They had the two girls, Francis and Pauline, and both of them is still living and very active in the church. Pauline, her and her husband separated, and later she come out here to Utah and went to Brigham Young and met a man and married, and they have filled a mission.
What about when you went to temple?
Huh?
I hear about
All
when you
right,
went
but
to
let me,
temple.
one other thing. Virgil James is the way that Francis and him met. He had graduated from Brigham Young University. He was a little older man. And he come up there for some reason to represent the company he was with and met Francis. and that's where they got married then. But I want to tell you that. Now you said mention what?
You went to the temple.
Oh, all right. We set out. We stopped at Madisonville. My older's mother lived there, and so she said she tried to discourage us in a way that it was so far. 1,500 miles then was like going around the world, and but we proceeded on, and we didn't have any trouble, and we reached Salt Lake, and in about 3 or 4 days, I don't remember just how long. But anyway, we went to the Jameses with Virg and Francis home, Etaw and Joe stayed at Sister Peterson's. Now the Petersons, at one time, prior to that was a mission president's there in Texas. So we knew them very well. So with those two homes and their hospitality afforded us to go. We didn't have the money to go, but we had been invited to come and stay to their house, and we had enough of money for our needs of for the car and so forth. So that's when we received our endowments, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the date. I have it in my genealogy book.
What did you think about it?
Well, wonderful. I guess this is one of the highlights of our life, to have the vows that you take in the temple and learning of many things about the gospel. So we enjoyed that trip. We went 3 times before we returned home. And we returned home, and I was then the second counselor in the branch presidency. And so we went back to work.
Okay, tell me about when you started building the chapels.
Well, can I tell you a little bit before?
Yeah.
I've got just a little bit. We decided after we got back from Utah that we should have our own home. So Dorothy was, as I was telling you about her, and your mama was pregnant with Rudy. We bought a place out on Airline Road, and she and I built a garage apartment. And we had very little help. Joe Kelly maybe helped us a little. But Mother, she climbed on the 2nd floor and
Talking about my memo?
yes. Yeah, you remember. Rudy was to be born soon, maybe a couple of months. But we did get it finished and to live in, enough to live in, and alone I finished, but I liked a little bit more. But prior to this time, I knew, that he was going to have the baby, and I went to the branch president, which was Francis Mayo, and asked him if I could have a month off as being second counselor, that I had to finish the house before the baby was born. And so he said, I'll let you know. So he went to, I think, El Real Christiansen was our mission president then. So he, I may be wrong on that, but anyway, it was one of the mission presidents. He says, I'll let you know. So I didn't know this till a little later. He went to the mission president and asked him about what he thought about it. And he said, that will tell us about Moroni. If he's off from church a month and comes back, you got the man for the position. So, of course, we had no other idea than to do it. But it had to be proved to them. And after the month, we was in the house. And Rudy was born, and of course we went on from there all the way up to branch president. We were talking now. You asked me a while ago about that.
When did you start building chapels?
Well, how this come about is very, very, I was working at J.C. Penney's. And I think I've mentioned in here, Rudy Willard was building a drugstore, and we bought the drugstore and we sold it. And so then that was, I believe, in 33, or within a half a year or something, that the stake, the Houston stake was organized. We covered all Houston, Galveston, and back around to Bryan, and most of Texas at that time. It was up to Dallas. There was two states organized in Texas. All Louisiana was to this area that we lived. And so when the day we was called and approved by the congregation, Brother Lee, I believe, ordained me. I could be wrong, but I have it down in my book. Anyway, it was two of the apostles there, and they organized the state. And so the first thing, when we was in line that afternoon, Francis Word was a counselor, and another man was a counselor. I don't remember his name. But, Dr. Trinnell was the first stake president. So, of course, he was coming around and greeting us. And at that time, we had sold the drugstore, and I was really free. I'd like to add this. We had just completed, sometime after, before the stake was organized, I can get them all together. But we'd taken a month off after we sold the drugstore. And we went out to California, and we went up to Canada, and all back. We went to New York and all around. We was gone a month. Well, then we come back, then this happened. So, but anyway, we had our go out. When the stake president and the authorities was congratulating us bishops, the first, when President Trinnell come by, he said, the first responsibility of God is to build a chapel on the north side of Houston. So that's where we lived, and I knew they would divide something. We was meeting at the Calumet Ward at that time, which building belonged to the church. You all heard me today talking to this brother about what he's writing. Anyway, so he said the first thing, and I said, well, gee, I've only built little buildings. I've done little building. He says, you can do it. So I said, all right. Well, within about 6 months or sometime, I couldn't point out the exact time, we started to build. And Sanford Harper had been the branch president. Joe Stone was the first counselor, and Bill Burkhart was the second counselor in the branch. So they had already bought that property where the Melbourne Ward is now, and it was paid for. But see, it showed in our books that we had about $18,000, and enough to get started on and start raising. Well, when we started the building, And I'd had enough of I put this in experience to know what I wanted to do. So first, Brother Trinnell says, you go to Salt Lake. And I come to Salt Lake and talked to Brother McKean. He was the building committee, one man, the committee. So we went over some plans, and he wanted to know my qualifications. And I told him, and he said, okay, us build it, and build the chapel and the one wing for the Relief Society room and some classrooms. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, I don't want to build anything unless we can build a recreation hall for the young people. Well, I said, we need it. We got young people down there and they don't have anything really. And so he said, well, it's fine. You can go ahead if you get the money. So at that time, the church was going 50-50. They paid 50, we paid 50. And we was promised we'd get 50 cents an hour. Everyone had put hours in on that building, which was built with time and material. I mean, our time, the Warren's time, or the Branch's time. No, we was a war then. So we started. And I had some experience. I laid the slab. I got, some says, oh, that's wrong, but I know. I don't know if it's me, or the inspiration of the Lord, but I had seen buildings, and I built the homes. So I wanted to build a solid slab with plenty of steel on it, in one pour. I mean, taking us 2 days to pour it, but one time. And so we poured the slab. So I sent in for the first draw. And so Brother McKean called me on the phone. Didn't write me. And I called our house, and Bala come and got me, and I went and talked to him, and he said, Brother Stone, you don't have any money here. And I said, well, the books show we do. He said, well, that was spent for the land. Sanford and Joe and Bill Burkhardt had brought the property. And that money was spent, but during the change of the mission and into the stakes, the books had never been developed that era there. So while we said we've got to pay for this, he said, well, we will pay for it. I'll send you the money for it, but you have to get busy now and raise that money and let's get straight now. And he explained to me. He said, now don't let me down. I said, well, we will not let you down. So I come back and ask our president, our state president, what to do. And he said, well, Earl and I, go far as you can. Stretch every dollar until you run out of money. Then we'll figure out what to do. Well, we never stopped until we finished the building and met in it. And I'd like to say this, if it's ever known, if it's ever come up, there's two great men in the city of Houston. One of them was our mayor, Hoffine. My dad had retired from the city and knew Mayor Hoffine. And so he said, I'll go with you to it and ask him. So we went, and my dad explained to him, is this the first Mormon church really built by the people of the city and so forth? And so he helped us. So there's a couple of other men you want to know. There's one, Mark Brown, and Jerry Hoke. Now, Mark Brown, that property over there, you know how wooded it was near our house. We started there one day cleaning, and we seen it. We couldn't even, it'd take us 6 months to clean it. The trees in there are so thick. So, Jerry Hope, I may have said Mark Brown. I mean, the mayor, but the mayor didn't, he come in with money. And so, what Mark Brown, he worked for a company that give us a big drag line or bulldozer. And went in there in about 2 weeks, we had every tree down, piled in a pile and burnt, the biggest fire you ever seen. And so that cleared that before, of course, before we poured the slab. So that was fine. And we poured our slab, and we had John.
How long did it take to build the chapel?
I would say it'd taken us about 4 years really, but not to really build it. We was held up. I'll get to that in just a minute. But anyway, when we got the slab poured, we went to put the framework up. And we decided to put these arches that to build now in so many churches. And I called Brother McKinney about that. And I said, we want to put arches in it. And he said, well, we have never put arches in our, says it looks too much like Catholic and other. And I said, well, we can go on and finish our building if we can do that. He said, well, you go ahead. I don't give you authority to build a building. So we had to order the beams from Oregon. And that held us up mighty near a year, 6 months, or longer than that. I'd say anywhere from 8 months to a year that the building sit there, because we couldn't get those arches. And in that same thing, we got a timber called Timdek that made the roof, and it made the ceiling. And so that lasted that away exactly until just a short time ago. Now they've remodeled a little. But anyway, and here's one, I'm skipping around a little bit. It'll cover it. That was during the end of the war, or maybe a year before the end of the war. And the servicemen that was out at Ellington Field, Ellington Air Base. They had an air base out there, you know that. So they would come in on Friday nights, and some at noon Friday, it depends when they could get away. And they would work, it'd be maybe 10 or 12 of them. And they worked Friday when they come in till late at night, and they'd get up Saturday morning. We worked all day Saturday, and they would stay over for services that we was having on Calumet, see, until we got where we could have services there. But them men, I wished I knew their names. But John, them brother, and they just worked so hard them days, helped us really get the building up. That's after we'd got the beams and two. And this company that Jerry Hope belonged to, was employed by, also sent us a boomer. We call them boomers, and I don't know what to call them now, to set up the Timdek, the beams. And we got them set up. Then we got the Timdek. Now the Timdek was a 4x4, and they was tongue and grooved. So we put them in, then we put the slate roof on it, then we started inside. So all in all, we was about 4 or 4.5 years from the time we started until we had the dedication. This is where the Lord comes in. How in the world would we ever get? We built that chapel, and we furnished that chapel. We made all the pews handmade in the recreation hall, because it was great big. We made them. And your grandmother, she was over putting cushions, what do you call them? Putting cushions in all the seats. And this I got a little kickback from Brother McCain. I said, we want to put cushion on the seats. He said, well, Bishop, the church does not okay cushion seats. And I said, well, we have the money and we have the help. He says, go ahead and do it. He said, and
So who
So-
dedicated the building?
Brother Lee, I believe Brother Lee, and well, anyway, he was one. No, gee, I wish if you'd have told me this, I could have brought you all that you ought to have the dedicatorial prayer. But it was Harold B. Lee, I'm sure of that. I don't know who was one of the other authority with me. I hope I'm not wrong on that, but if I do, you can change it someday. You can make an addendum in that. Or I'll look at home or when you come up Christmas. Okay, and the chapel was dedicated now this is where Jerry, huh?
What, year 19? Written there on cement by the
That
front
was
door.
getting late in the 30s. I know maybe the 40s. Maybe 41, I'm not sure, but I'd have to give you that information later. But anyway, where Jerry Hope come in, now we was in a bind for a parking place. We had the property. So he went to his company and they said, well, we will furnish the slag. You know what slag is? Well, I better tell you so you'll be,
They
it's
used
a
to throw it
byproduct.
primary.
Huh?
They used to go out to parking lot and throw it to a primary.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's what y'all got in trouble with. Anyway, it's a byproduct of steel mills. What they have left over after they do something, melt their steel. Anyway, he got enough to make our parking lot. Jerry Hope did. And so, but the church, now, they give us 50% of what it would cost. So they give us money to do things with. And when Mayor Hoffine gave us money, they give us 50% of what he did. What he donated. I don't know how he donated, but it would come through the city. Or it may come out of his own. I don't know that. I never questioned it. But anyway, it was donated, it was dedicated, and now dropping back just a little bit, I hope this don't go in the paper. But when we had the Calumet Ranch, then it was awarded. So they wasn't happy there because Melbourne was too close. It was a long ways away, but it was too close. They wanted to go out in Central Park. So they was going to really pull a big deal. We had the agreement that they were to give us part of the money that come from the sale of that building and that property. And the mission home was on that property too. And okay, everything was agreed to. But when they got ready and sold it, and we had our building built, but we were still in debt, they wouldn't give us any money. So they sold the building. Now, Marion Gibbons' attorney, he was the bishop, and the stake president, Brother Trinell, was still here. Well, they got together and said, well, let's sell this building, then we can build the building out in Central Park. So they sold it, had the money, ready to go. And Salt Lake says, that money's ours. You send all of that money to Salt Lake. Because you see, Salt Lake had built a Calumet Chapel. We built a little. Jesse Kirkpatrick, he gave $1,000. And the rest of us give what we could, maybe $25 or $50. And that was all was put into that building in Salt Lake. Put in the rest so Houston would have a chapel. So that's where the real key comes in. They couldn't build a building, they didn't have a place to meet, it was sold. So they just went to renting around. And finally they come out and made a deal with us to meet in our chapel. So we had a 2-ward chapel for a good while. And finally that gave them a chance to meet out there. It cost them nothing. And they raised the money and finally started the building in Central Park. That's what this telephone call is about today.
How about, did you build any other chapels?
Well, yes, I built in all total of 8 more. I built 9 in all
Right.
total. What I built, I don't know, I built the first, was built in Huntsville. Was it, yes, Huntsville. Huntsville, Texas, that's right. That was the next start. Then they said, Moroni, and I, about that time, or maybe a little after, things had changed, and Wesley Palmer was put in as the stake president. I think that's right. Or either he was put in as missionary elders over the elders. Okay, all right. Anyway, I was the bishop then. I had advanced to the. So, all right, we built a hospital building, and which was very good. We come out good. All of this, John, these buildings I'm talking about, is all built with labor from the wards. No money. Well, Salt Lake put in their portion, but I mean, no other way. In Bryan. Then the next one we built was in it was in the lower part of Texas where we buy Alvia. You know, it's a highway that goes at the end of Texas. From Mexico, you can go over that there. Yeah, well, I built one in Brownsville, but that wasn't the next. I think.
Laredo.
No, well, let's come back to that. I'll tell you in a little. But anyway, I built that one. Then I built 3 then in the valley. Then San Antonio had started their building, and we come to San Antonio. Now I'm talking about three men, which was a black man, and myself, and a carpenter that come from Huntsville, which wasn't a member of the church. So we come to San Antonio and help finish that building. Then they want, I tried this other things in my mind, but they won't. About where we built in the valley. That was the 3rd building. Anyway, they said, well, all that time I was bishop, and every Saturday at noon we would quit and we would come in. You wasn't very big then, but you were beginning to grow up. We knew you was going to make a man. Then that finished. They said, well, that's it. So, brother, let me tell you a little more about this building. Roland Bramer. You talk about people having problems. He was married to a man that had a daughter. Of course, he married the daughter. It had a lumber yard, the man did. So Roland operated. He managed to, and we got most of our lumber from there. And before this winds up, I'll tell you a little something about that. But anyway, Roland sent, I had brought a truck, and so we finished there. Then they said, Moroni, we got a couple of more buildings we want you to build. And one of them was in, both of them was in Oklahoma. One was in, I don't know the name, I forget the name of the Oklahoma town. It was an Indian town. And another one was in Oklahoma. And but then it was getting up, that was about the 8th one that I built. And these may make one if you count them all up. But anyway, they ended up with 9. So they said we got one more, which was in Ardmore, Oklahoma, is where we built one. That's where the prison was. And the prison made the brick. They made brick, and we used them brick to brick up the chapel. So from there we went to Salina, Kansas. That was to be the last one. And we drove from Salina, Kansas home every Saturday. And we met Saturday, Sunday, all day, and we had a bishopric meeting at night. And Monday morning, we headed out, or when we got through and got loaded, we always get a load of lumber that Roland had sent up to us to carry over there. So, of course, now these, remember these, and the smaller ones was prefab buildings. But we had to put a lot of lumber in them to make them a little bit larger than the regular prefab building. So, the last one was in Salina, Kansas. And that was cold in the winter. From where Salina, Kansas, it had an air base there. It was about, it was seeing distance from where we built that chapel. And we got a few little help there, but not much. It wasn't many airmen that was going there to their building. And anyway, we finished up there, but this little thing really bothered us. One other place too. There's one other one. I don't know where it's at. We'll have to get that. It was 9 altogether anyway. I was building a building, and I needed a cement man. And it was a black man come along and wanted a job. I said, okay, he said. And I said, do you have a machine? You know, that's a finishing machine, gasoline, and finish your slab. So that evening, the branch president come by. And so he said, what you doing with that guy here? I said, I hired him. He's a good cement man. He helped us pour that slab of that building. And he said, you know, he's a convict. Or he was. He's been released. He killed a man over his wife, or over his girlfriend or something. And he went to me. I said, well, I'd like to use him. He said, well, you go ahead and use him. But he was so good when we left to go up to, it was up to Oklahoma, but we built one more in Texas at the border. I forget the town. But anyway, he stayed with us, and we built the 2 in Oklahoma. We built the 1 in Salina, Kansas, and he was through. And he said, you come in, we're going to release you as bishop, and we're going to put in another man. So, fine. They ought to have done it a long time ago, but then when I got here, they said, no, we're not going to release you. They found out this brother smoked, and was a good member. I didn't know he smoked. But they had found out he had a word of wisdom problem. They wouldn't put him in. So, then we had a little lull there. We built your dad's home, your mother's home. Your dad was in a service at that time. But your dad put all the air conditioning ducts and things in the Melbourne Warren building before he went to the army. And the time he got back, we had the old home there down the street from where your home is now. We built that, and the black man was still with us. And Obie, he lived at Huntsville. He was still with me. And so us 3, with really the membership. And Rudy, he worked during the school years. He worked every year with me. And he was big enough then to do fiddling, but he either worked or he went with one or the other. So when we got through at Salina, Kansas, I was still bishop a little while, but I was soon released and put in another.
Tell me about becoming a patriarch. Tell me
Well,
about visiting with President Kimball.
You know, Dorothy and Diane and Rudolph and Bauer, I guess. I don't know if she made a comment or not, but they was changing a lot then in the organizations. And so that is when I had my accident at the museum. I was just getting over it. So one day, on Sunday, we was having our state conference. Every day I rode a bicycle. And so, no, I got that wrong, John. This was on Saturday. This is right, I was telling you, but before that, they called Fowler one Saturday morning, and they said he wanted me to come out to the church. They was having a leadership meeting with the general authority. And so, Fowler said right then, said they go. Make a patriarch out of you. I said, no, I don't think. Because I don't know, I just had the feeling, no. And so, I went out there, and all he done was ask me to give a closing prayer. And so, the next morning, Sunday morning, I was on my bicycle, and riding. We was going to conference at 10 o'clock, but I was up early. And so she come and found me in the car, told me that they wanted me out at the meeting. And so when I got to the meeting, after a little bit, I think that's the way the prayer, I don't know if they wanted me to prayer. Yeah, they did. It was on Saturday when I first went there. But anyway, that Sunday morning, then after we was through, I was Lee Clark state president. I don't know. I don't remember. I'd have to look back at that. But anyway, they said, Brother Kimball wants to see you. And so then is the first inkling I got that something was happening. Because there was no other place to go beside a bishop or high councilman or something. And so I went in and I sat down with President Kimball. And so he told me, he said, I want to call you today to be a patron. And so, of course, I didn't act, I guess, excited too much. And he said, I don't know whether you really realize what that calling is. But he said, that is the calling next to the general authorities of the church, or the 70s. So you can go no other higher within your state. Said that holds a priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood, but it is not the position of the bishop or the state president. Has nothing to do with the patriarch. So then he started, and John, he said, now do you have any questions about it? And by that time they had told me or the bishop to call Viola to get her out. So he talked to me, John. I asked him, how do you give a blessing? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, you've been patriarch, haven't you? He said, yes, but I don't know how you give a blessing. He said, the only thing that I know this, that if you love the people and the people love you, he said, I want to tell you this, that don't get into church politics. Stay out of it. If the bishop is not a good bishop or the stake president, you just forget it. It's none of your business. You do that. And if you will do that and live close to the Lord, you have no problem. All you do is your physical part of a patriarchal blessing. Is laying the hands on and give them a blessing. And how we have to record it, you know that.
How many blessings have you given?
Between 15 and 1600. I don't know. Because in Malmo, I had a typist, but she taking care of all the numbers, keeping them straight, keeping them, when the typist would get through with the blessing, she would bring them back to me and I had to read them. And if there was no correction, then your mama was taking them and she mailed them out. One copy to the participant and the other one to the archives. So, no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. The other one went in a book, and when that book got filmed, then you sent them to the archives. So, your mother or your mama taking care of all of that. I didn't have any of that to do.
Do you remember any
So-
blessings that you can remember that really stand out? Remember
Oh,
Sister Walton?
there's a,
Remember Sister Walton?
yes, yes.
Who-
She was a black lady.
Remember
The
anything
Walton
about her?
I'm talking about now, it may have been another one, but
Remember anything about her?
yes, I do. Yes, I do.
What?
In her blessing, now this was before the church accepted blacks. Her blessing was really not a patriarchal blessing. At that time, I give her two blessings. One after they made the reformation of the black into the church. But she wanted a blessing before then. But it was a beautiful blessing. She was a beautiful person. And she really loved the church. She taught a class and she done so much. But anyway, I give her a blessing first. And later, when they made change and put blacks in, she was one of the first black person. And her blessing was a real good blessing. All of them was based on worthiness, activity. This was the meat of a blessing. Because you have your blessing, you know what is in this. But John, we've had a lot of foresight, and lately, well, I'd say 6 months ago, it was the biggest son I ever had. We were down in the woodland, and people's home in Neil, and I think there were 35 to 38 young people there. And you talk about 30 minutes, and you get 30 minutes. And you saw the same thing.
You remember anything about Sister Walton's blessing?
Well,
Anything about her boy?
yes.
What about it?
Her and her husband were separated. And I promised her. Now, this was in the first blessing. Not a blessing from church. So that she would live with it. Grew up and be a member of the church. Now, the mission part, I don't know. He did missionary work with the local missionaries. But now this one, yes. I was questioning on her blessing. And, but it never mind on the thing. Because then, the state president had to, okay, all the blessings is given. Then the bishop gives the blessing and the state president. And he told me at that time he wanted to see the blessing. And he questioned it. And I said, well, I don't know. I told him, I quoted to him what Brother Kimball told me. And I said, that's what I said. But he told me that you got to know the right to change the blessing that comes to you. So I said, it was there and I get it. And whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. It's been a year or 2 or 3 years was when the blacks could go to the temple and hold the priesthood. And he was promised also in that he would hold the priesthood. This was here for 2 years. She was the happiest person in the world because she was the first telephone call I got when the news came out that the church had accepted the blacks. So it worked on. I don't really know because she went into some of the wards that your folks was in. And I never did really follow up. I don't know what happened to the boy, but he did go with some missionaries when he was not very big. Before this come out, he just wanted to see what they had to say. So, anyway, when it come out that, and she was happy, but John, down there where they are are so many blacks. They haven't accepted the church like we thought they would. We thought they would come in for welfare and, you know, but it's a hard thing for them of living the word of wisdom, and they haven't come in that great. But one other thing I wanted to mention to you about patriarchal blessing. A bishop from Bay City come up and made I want two little things. Have we got time to? Two, there was a bishop from Bay City, daughter, wanted to bless it. Now, a bishop, patriarch, does not interview, but they talk about things, about morals, and not whether, are you morally clean? That's not asked. But think about important things like that. So this bishop come up and brought his daughter, and we talked, we went in and talked, and you have the feeling. And I think there was two whole in my whole life that I rejected. Wait a while. I think you should wait. So after we got through talking, this was one of the hardest things I did. I told her, I said, honey, or dear, or something I called her. I said, I don't think you're ready for this, do you? And she said, no, I don't think so. So I had to go and tell her dad. And I brought him in and told him, and he's understood. So, well, that's fine. I thought she was, and I made a mistake. So he said, everything was cool, you know, talking our language now. And so they went away. In about 6 months, she came back, and I gave her a blessing.
What was the other thing you said?
The other thing was this, John, there was a doctor that lived in Huntsville, had a daughter. It was time for the patriarchal blessing, so he had made arrangements. And so he called me 3 or 4 times, something come up, this come up, that come up. So we set a Sunday. And so he called me Sunday morning and said that he and his wife, he was a dentist, they had to go to Austin, a meeting. I said, I'll be there. Now, you don't worry. I said, my daughter has a car, so she'll meet us up at your house. So, okay. She come on pretty early, and we talked and visited Paul and her. And so we got in, I talked to her, and I was ready to go. And I said, you always ask, do you want anyone with you? And I said to her, I said, do you want anyone in here while I give you a blessing? She said, no. So I had a problem with him because he had made all arrangements. So I went out and talked to him, and he was so nice. He said, oh, that's fine. Don't worry about it. He said, I want to do what she wants to do. But now we got the black sisters down there.
Okay. Tell us about the other times that general authorities came and stayed at the house.
That was, you ready? Well, you know, another incident, John, that we was criticized for, and that was for building next to the church. And one of the sisters had been raised here in Salt Lake, made a statement that she didn't know that the church built bishops' homes. And I said, well, how stupid that is, as much as you're known about the church. Anyway, that's that. Well, the blessings that we got out of that can never be replaced, because we had all during, while they had sticks in there for a long time, Paul would always fix their dinner. And most time their lunch. Then dinner to us was 12 o'clock. So when they was out, they'd slip the authorities out, slipping out the back door over to our house. sometimes they would lay down 30 minutes and they'd eat. But this went on for a long, long while. And this is where your mama worked, because she worked like everything to get everything as a general authority should have. So I don't know just how this ended or changing stake presidents and things. I guess they felt not ever spent the night with us. They always spent the night with the, as far as I know, with the stake president. And but not only the general authorities, it was some other brethren of the stake and others when we would have conferences that Ball would prepare meals for them. And he'd come out the back door over the house and nobody would ever see him. And he could come over there and rest. And so we enjoyed.
Like who?
Gosh, I don't know. Brother Gilly.
No. Who's the general authorities?
Oh, gee, John, you got me on the spot. Oh, I know that some of them were 7, this morning. Well, anyway, Brother Kimball, Brother Lee, and Brother, there's about 6 of them that come during that time. But that was the 3, Brother, he used to be a wonderful speaker. I don't know, John. And he
Okay.
used to waste the tape. I'd have to get it out of my
Okay.
book.
Tell me when you came up here and you visited with Brother Lee.
Well, when we used to come up to conferences, we would all go around to the back of or we'd have conference, what do you call it? The cabinet. We out the back door, and you could speak to all the general authorities. And so that's where we would all land for. And it seemed like they had ushers to kind of hold the people back, but they let us go. But this one day, Brother Lee had been in our home 2 or 3 times. So they had to come down here. They come in and set apart a stake president, and he worked at one of the stores downtown, and the next week he was released and all. For 2 weeks they was back again. And but anyway, Brother Lee knew me very well then, and he shook my hand, and Sister Lee was there. One of their daughters were there, and a bunch of kids. Maybe more of our folks were there. But anyway, we talked, and he said, why don't you come out and have, she did. Said, why? She asked Brother Lee, said, don't you have Brother Stone to come out and have lunch with us? So he said, that would be good. So I went. And I went out and we talked. I was glad to have a good talk with him. And he told me a lot about the church and the things. So I count that was a highlight in my life.
What do you say about shaking hands?
Well, this he told me. He told me amongst the things. He said, Brother Stone, and I've always done it, and I have been criticized for it, love. Said, now he didn't know it, but he said, when you shake hands with the general authorities or any adult, and they have got children there, you shake hands with them children. Because most children is ignored when, especially the general authority, and they have some kids, maybe they're grandchildren. They don't shake hands with them. And they grow up to feel, they know it, if they're large enough to remember. And he said, never overlook a child, because he said that's the closest thing from heaven. He said heaven, but I would have said the spirit world, but that's what he said. Then a little child, they're innocent. And so I told him that, I said, I really tried to do that all my life. And I've been criticized for it, taking up the time. Just like today. When was it today? Oh, we met. You're off now, or are you still on? Well, we better go on with the church and I'll tell you what happened. Anyway, we finished and we went back to the 2 o'clock session. And Brother Lee was never back in our home anymore. That was his last trip to conference there. But the other general authorities, I don't remember their name, but I know Brother Kimball was in our home many times. For, you know. He died here a little while ago. Fine speakers, wrote many books.
Richards?
Who?
Richards?
He wrote 2 or 3 books.
McConkie.
McConkie has been there. And there's several, I forget them.
Okay. One of the happiest moments of your life.
I don't know, John. To be a person that has had limited education and so many blessings, and I guess the happiest time in my life, we have to go all together in one, is the general authorities and the brethren of the church and the church people. But all of that is I'd have to have it all wrote down to answer. Is my family. I feel I have the sweetest family that maybe more than I deserve. But y'all and the Thomases, Rudy and his family, though Rudy had a separation. And he was justified in that. I know he was not perfect. It was some of his fault. But I don't know if you ever heard that. Linda had told Viola and I that if we didn't put the Mormon church and join their church, we were sure to go to hell. That's how she felt about it. And that never set too well with us, but I don't think she ever knew that it did. Because we love Linda because we love the kids. And Diane's family, I don't know how to answer that question intelligently. All I know, I love her. I hope I don't have any enemies. Maybe one. I don't know if there's no record. But his wife seems to be very, very, every time she sees me, she speaks to me and his family. They even, before we had a little conflict, they named one of their boys Moroni. And they call him Moroni. Yeah. So, I don't know if I have any enemies. I hope I haven't. I've tried to live a life that I wouldn't have. You know, the worst one could tell you things that I've done bad would be Viola. She could tell you a lot. Don't ever get her on here. But I don't know if you know this, Kay, but I guess I had a revelation when I was not over 5 or 6 years old. That Viola would be my wife. I knew that growing up, going to school, and she wouldn't have too much to do with me. And she dated before I left Madisonville. I don't know. And we dated a little. I dated her sister, Eleanor. And but I never had the feeling. You know, when you have a feeling for someone, it's there. We went on picnics and things together as far as just personally say we do a date or something like that. But I tell you, one thing, we had a dance at his house, my brother, and then, back then, I hope I haven't been into it, they ever so often, everybody would take one room and take all the furniture out, and we'd have a big dance. And so, Val and I was dancing head to head, not cheek to cheek, but
How
head to
old were
head.
you?
Oh, pretty young, probably 15, 13. But anyway, her mother came up and shook the flower over her shoulder and said, listen, y'all stand apart while you dance. So, and she wasn't too strict on me, but maybe you'd want to put this. Her mother was so happy when we got married, and my mother, when Willard married Madeline, and I married Viola, we went and talked to Papa and Mama about it, and Papa, he didn't, man don't say much as a woman, so then my mother said, well, I have picked out in my mind, Mariah, you would marry Viola, and Willard, you would marry Madeline. So it passed, it come to pass. So,
Okay, Papa, let's say, Papa, you got 25 more years to live.
no,
Okay.
John.
What do you want to do? What do you
Well,
want to do the rest of the time you're here on this earth?
as you know,
What's important?
now, I don't know, John, because I know I have something to do, or I wouldn't be living today, because you know, I've had too many escapes of death. I know I've got something else to do, but now that I have put in, I am a Meredith patriarch, I'll always be a patriarch, but I only give blessings to people that really want me to. And now you can receive, used to you can receive a blessing unless you either go to the stake president and your bishop, but now you can to the bishops recommend. You can get a patriarchal blessing. But for me to give a blessing, they have to go to the stake president. Because the stake president explained to me that, says you can give blessings to a lot of your friends who are still want you, and they do. But said, if we don't put a lid on it, they will still want you, because after living all your life with these people, the first thing comes up, no, I want my son, And the other, I was recommended Brother Altavirus, you know him. His sons think, John, sets the son out and bring it in. And he's married now, and he's got a little baby. I was asked to stand in the circle for blessed him the other day, but that boy is Spanish. And now Altavirus, can I have 1 minute with that? Well, they filled a mission there in Houston. And after the mission, they got together, they got married. And then they moved back to Houston, and they have been wonderful members. They just Brother Altavirus, and I recommended it. I was called and said, we want another patriarch. And so I recommended Brother Altavirus.
What are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Well, that, John, I don't know.
What do you want to do?
Come visit.
Okay.
I don't know, John, really. All I want to do is to serve the Lord the best of my ability. I don't have really any, I want to do things like I'm doing with Dorothy's, where she works. I help them once a week now, and I really got a pleasure out of that. Volunteers of America. Not that organization necessarily, but others. Because I do a lot of work for other people that not, that their husband can't do, or they can't do, or they can't get done, or they're not able to get it done. And I don't know, I keep up I guess the rest of my life, the rent houses, and I don't know. Did you ever you're not my age, so I can ask you when you got plans. But I hope that I don't know who will pass before where I do. I don't know. But I think the Lord will see fit to leave her instead of me.
You got about 15 or so great grandkids to keep up with.
Yes. But she can do a better job. If her health will get good again, but she can get health later. And that's the very strange part. Mine's getting better. I wouldn't go away from home this long, a year ago or a year. But I don't have any problems now. And, of course, I hope all this is not in Canada. As long as I control my eating, is my problem. It's my big problem. It's my eating.
We don't want to hear about you eating.
So you know that. I don't. But John, that's a question I think I would like for you to answer when you get to be 78 years old.
Just throwing it back at you.
What is your plan then? All my plan is to serve the Lord in any capacity that I'm called and hope to live a good life above reproach. That's all I hope is. That we will be resurrected and be as a family. So, what else you got to really hope for? I don't want a job. So, I got you. Can I tell you one more little thing? It doesn't even contain this. I told you maybe one of you. A fellow called me. They'd done a little work on the church, but I just wonder what people think about Mormons. A little job on the church, and they had a man. Then I met him while he was there working on the church. And so later, his business went down, so he cut his crew down. He missed secretary. So he found out he needs somebody to answer the telephone. So he called me one day and said, I'm Mr. Van Hansen. Lee was his name. Said, I'd like to have a secretary. And I'd like for her to be a Mormon. And that was very funny. And I said, why do you want to be a Mormon? He said, well, I find out that Mormons are great people from working in your chapel. He said, I would just like to have a Mormon. I said, well, I don't know. So he said, well, how about you coming to work for me? And I said, I don't have time. So I called our state employment man, I don't know what to call him. But anyway, he had Betty Carlson, John, you know her, with all her children. Her husband died with cancer, maybe a year ago or less. And so this employment man called and got Betty. So Betty, she'd been a housewife other than, and so he's given her a chance to go to school, be harder, to go to school and learn some typing, and learn some, what's your brother doing downstairs? Computer, or to go to school. He's given her time. And she said he's the most gracious man she ever met. And his wife and his son. So this is the way the church works.
Okay, you've been in the church all your life.
I was born and raised and baptized.
Been in the church for 78 years.
No,
Yeah.
I'm 78 years old.
So you've been in the church all that time.
I was 8 years old when I
You
was
was baptized. Okay, 70 years.
But
What's the most important thing you've learned about church? What's the most important thing you learned about testimony?
well, your testimony has to be very strong. Maybe I have a little criticizing